During a congressional hearing, Representative Jim Banks engaged in a sharp exchange with Dr. Harper, pressing her on ageism, race, and hiring practices. Banks opened by thanking the witnesses before turning his attention to Dr. Harper's past writings on ageism. He noted that she had previously argued media coverage of President Joe Biden's re-election raised concerns about age-based bias and asked whether she still believed ageism played a role in the last election cycle.
Thank you for holding this hearing, and thank you to all of the witnesses for taking the time to be here. We certainly really appreciate it. Dr. Harper, I've got a couple questions for you. Just starting out, do you believe that ageism is a form of bigotry?
Yes.
You do? Yeah, I thought so because you wrote an article saying that ageism in media discourse about Biden's re-election is an issue. Do you still believe that ageism was an issue in the past election cycle?
I believe that ageism in any form and in any context is a problem.
Do you believe that Americans who were concerned about Joe Biden's age were bigoted?
I did not say that in my article, nor do I claim that now.
You said that ageism is a form of bigotry.
Ageism is a form of bigotry, but I did not say that in my article.
And
you cannot misrepresent my idea.
Okay, well, why don't you provide your explanation for that? Ageism is a form of bigotry. People who were concerned about Joe Biden's age were ageist. How do you square that?
I'm less concerned about Joe Biden's age. I am more concerned about young people and older Americans being systematically denied opportunities and access because of their age.
Do you think that Joe Biden's age had a relation to his cognitive decline?
That is outside of my area of expertise.
Do you need to be an expert to determine whether an 82-year-old man who is clearly visibly declining mentally on camera, if that has anything to do with his age?
I'm not a cognitive scientist.
You're not? Okay. Of course you're not. Do you think those Americans were right to be concerned about Joe Biden's age?
Again, you're missing the point. The point is about the ageism itself. Okay. It isn't about Joe Biden.
We're going to move on. Do you believe that America should be a colorblind society? For instance, should people be treated differently based on their race? It's just a yes or no question.
It's not a yes or no question.
It's a yes or no question.
It is as I said in the beginning of my testimony, America
yes
has not done right by indigenous peoples, by black people, by Asian American and Pacific Islander people.
Should people be treated differently based on their race? Yes or no?
People should receive the services and the support and the remedies that are owed to them.
That they should be treated differently based on their race.
They should receive the remedies that are owed to them because of the systemic racism and injustice.
Do you believe that race should be considered in employer hiring practices?
I do not believe that white people are the only qualified people for jobs.
I didn't say that. Nobody said that. I asked you if race should be considered in employer hiring practices. And you're not going to intimidate me by slandering me as a racist.
I did not call you a racist. No, you're not going to intimidate me by insisting that I called you a racist.
Straightforward question. It's a yes or no question. Should race be considered in employer hiring practices? Yes or no?
I believe that diversity ought to be considered as companies and other organizations attempt to reflect their customers, our country.
I'll take that as a yes. Which race do you think should be preferred?
I do not think that a single race should be preferred.
Well, you just said that you believe that race should be considered in employer hiring practices.
I don't know. There's going to be a transcript of this hearing. I didn't say that in that way.
Okay. Why don't you explain what you believe?
What I said and what I believe is that the demographic composition of workplaces, which our nation's military, and so on, our Congress ought to reflect the diversity of the United States of America.
Demographic composition, racial demographic. Is that what you're saying?
Racial, gender.
Okay, so race should be a factor in employer hiring practices. Yeah, that's what you're saying, is it not?
Organizations ought to attempt to match the diversity of their...
You're hopping around the question.
No, I am answering quite straightforwardly, as a matter of fact.
Who gets to determine which races are preferred?
I I already told you I don't have a single racial group.
You just told me that you believe that the racial demographic makeup should be taken into account in hiring practices.
And it should be reflected in all levels of companies and other organizations.
Okay, let's talk about college admissions. If two different children are applying for college, let's say one is white and one is black, and there's one slot available, should they be evaluated based on the same objective criteria? Test scores, for instance.
Are you familiar with holistic admissions?
Should they be held to the same standards regarding test scores?
I am a proponent of holistic admissions.
It's just a yes or no question.
Yeah, no, I can't answer that question for you as a proponent of holistic admissions.
Got it. I'll take that as a no. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Dr. Harper responded that ageism is a problem in any form and in any context. Banks then challenged her position, asking whether Americans who questioned President Biden's age were guilty of bigotry. Dr. Harper pushed back, saying she never made that claim and accusing the congressman of misrepresenting her argument. Banks continued pressing, pointing out that she had defined ageism as a form of bigotry and asked her to reconcile that view with widespread public concerns about Biden's age. When Banks asked directly whether the president's age could be connected to cognitive decline, Dr. Harper declined to answer, stating that the issue was outside her area of expertise. Banks responded by questioning whether expert credentials were necessary to observe what he described as visible mental decline. Dr. Harper reiterated that she was not a cognitive scientist and said the broader issue was discrimination based on age, not President Biden himself. The exchange then shifted to race and public policy. Banks asked whether America should be a colorblind society and whether people should be treated differently based on race. Dr. Harper rejected a yes or no framing, arguing that the United States has historically failed indigenous people and racial minorities and that remedies are still owed due to systemic racism. Banks followed up by asking whether race should be considered in employer hiring decisions. Dr. Harper said organizations should consider diversity in order to reflect the country they serve, while rejecting the idea that any single race should be preferred. Banks repeatedly pressed her to clarify whether that meant race should be a factor in hiring, noting that a transcript of the hearing would document her answers. The discussion later turned to college admissions. Banks asked whether two students of different races competing for a single college slot should be evaluated using the same objective criteria, such as test scores. Dr. Harper responded by supporting holistic admissions and declined to give a yes or no answer. Banks concluded the exchange by stating he would take her response as a no. The tense back and forth highlighted deep divisions over age, race, and equity policies, drawing clear lines between Republican concerns over fairness and Democratic arguments for systemic remedies.